This is Steve in the boardroom. Tom, can you give me a quick sound check? Sound check from the boardroom. Tom, can you respond?
Yeah, it's working now.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and call to order the January 15th meeting of the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee. Great to see everybody. Hope you had a good holiday season and had at least a couple of days to step back and take a little bit of a break. But of course, higher education in Kansas doesn't sit still for long. So we're back at it and appreciate all of you do, what all of you do on your respective campuses. So with that, we'll move into old business. Would consider approval of minutes or any discussion related to the December 18th committee meeting.
I'd move we approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion by Regent Rolfe, second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, my notes don't indicate any issues related to our agenda call from January 2nd, but want to provide any opportunity for follow-up. Vice President Frisbee, are you aware of any?
No, Mr. Chairman, there were some questions for WSU on their stadium project, and we will have a PowerPoint related to that later in the
Fantastic.
meeting.
Yeah, look forward to that. All right, we'll move on into new business. Discuss board policy for internal audit and review internal audit plans. I believe we have 3 presentations today, and we'll start off with Jana Clark from K-State. Welcome, Jana.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. No, it's not advancing, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. Okay, you can advance to the next slide. Maybe. Okay, there we go. So I've been in internal audit for 12 years at Kansas State, and our mission in internal audit has not changed a great deal. Our top priority is still to serve Kansas State by helping to strengthen internal controls, to improve compliance with the myriad of rules and regulations that our campus community faces, and to help improve operations, whether that's operational efficiencies or effectiveness. Next slide, please. The Institute of Internal Auditors standards require us to report periodically on various elements of the standards to senior leadership and the board. The audit charter was updated in 2024. We provided that to Regent Benson this morning, who reviewed it and approved that. The independence of the internal audit activity. The internal audit activity is independent as a result of our direct reporting relationship to the university president and the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee of the Board of Regents. The 2025 audit plan and the progress against the plan we will talk about in coming slides. Our resource requirements and our audit function, we have 3 full-time staff positions, and those are currently all filled. The results of the 2024 audit activities we will also discuss in future slides. We conform in all areas of the IIA standards and the Code of Ethics as a result of our 2023 external review. And management's response to risk in 2024 was acceptable. Next slide, please. So the next few slides talk about the 2024 audit projects that our office completed. I would like to highlight the 2 on the top, roles and access in the student data system and the offboarding process. Those were actually part of the audit plan for 2023. They carried over, they were begun at the end of 2023 and carried over to 2024. Those were both completed in the early part of 2024. You can see that we perform consulting engagements with our Student Governing Association, and so you'll see a list of student service fees there. We also completed the FY22 Conflict of Interest Review, which is a KBOR requirement. Next page, please. Halfway down this slide, I'd like to highlight the process for identifying duplicate payments. That is currently in progress. That was also listed on our 2023 audit program or our audit plan. We begun that at the end of 2023 and carried that into 2024. However, due to the cyber incident that we experienced back in the beginning of 2024, that one was delayed. We restarted that in August, and so we are about 80% complete with that. We have a couple of our conflict of interest reviews. They're in the reporting phase now. We had 2 from 2024 that were deferred to 2025, so you will also see those listed on the 2025 audit plan. We also decided to cancel 2 of our audits due to resource constraints. We do not have the staffing nor the time to complete the EH&S audit. And on the next page, the follow-up for the student athlete health and wellness audit. We do ongoing follow-up for our open recommendations, and we also triage our anonymous hotline. You'll also see on the bottom of this slide that we have quite a few activities that our staff are engaged in, including internal committees, external committees, and I currently serve on our national organization's board member. I'm a board member at large for our national organization. I also served as a peer review team lead for an external review for a public research university on the West Coast. Next slide, please. So our quality and assurance improvement program, that is also a requirement that we are to report to the board. And so as in 2024, we completed 16 of 24 audits that were on our original plan. Plus we had 3 additional investigations that were not on our original plan. So we completed a total of 19 audits and investigations. We also performed quarterly follow-up. We had 126 recommendations in 2024 that we performed follow-up on. 64 of those were new. We closed 40, and 19 of those recommendations were older than 1 year old. 12 of those happened to be related to one specific audit. That is not a concern for our office. Those things are progressing, and so we are seeing progress on each one of those recommendations that's still open. Next slide, please. So this slide explains what our methodology is for placing audit engagements on our plan. We talked to a variety of campus community members, including the university president, executive leadership, academic leadership council. We also look at our next gen strategic plan to make sure that the objectives and imperatives that are listed out in there, we are providing audit coverage to those areas. We also talked to risk and compliance officer, and I interact with a lot of internal audit leaders of higher education institutions throughout the nation. And so some of the things they're seeing, we see here at a delayed rate. And so we all have those conversations. We are including their input into our plan. The paragraph down at the bottom describes our consulting arrangement with Student Governing Association. Each year we review some student services fees, and we do those on a 3-year rotational basis. Next slide, please. So our Audit 2025 plan, I'm not going to go through each of these, but you will see 6 items carried over from 2024. Most of those are in progress as of today. We do have 2 that have not been started yet: the compliance with competitive bid process and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act audit that have not been started yet. We are finalizing the conflict of interest reviews for fiscal 2023 for 2 of our affiliated corporations. You will also see the consulting engagements with SGA for our student services fee audits there. KBOR required conflict of interest review for fiscal year 2024. Next slide, please. We will do 4 compliance audits this year, 2 of those related to legislative appropriations that Kansas State University has received. So we will be looking at compliance and spending of those appropriated funds. We will also be doing a follow-up of the KBOR Cyber Maturity Assessment, which has begun at K-State already as of last week. And we will be looking at the executive expense reimbursement process and ensuring that they are compliant with university policy. I've included placeholders for any anonymous hotline reports that we receive, and also any leadership requests that we receive throughout the year. I mentioned that we are also part of those internal and external committees, and so we will continue that service. Follow up on outstanding recommendations will also be an ongoing process. And then I am serving in my last year as the Association of College and University Auditors board member at large. However, I will be pursuing the opportunity to continue my service as part of the executive committee of the Association of College and University Auditors of the board. And with that, that is our audit plan. We appreciate the opportunity to serve Kansas State University and to serve Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great presentation. Thank you so much, Jana. Questions for Jana? Yes, Regent Dykes.
The 2 audits that you canceled, I didn't see those in 24. Walk me through why they were on the list, but then canceled without being pushed to the next year?
Yep, so they were on 2024, but not included in 2025. So it was environmental health and safety. We have a risk and safety officer that is looking particularly close at our EH&S function now. And so he is implementing some improvements in that area. And so I wanted to give them a chance to get those fully implemented before we go in and perform an audit. And so those are ongoing, and he said that they would not be completed in 2025. So we will look to include those in 2026. The follow-up for the student health and wellness, our general counsel was looking at that. They were implementing a policy or looking to implement a policy related to our medical personnel and their relationship with athletics particularly, and getting them under some sort of contract. Our general counsel for athletics has been involved in the house settlement, which is a huge topic, and trying to figure out funding for that. And so that's why we've pushed that off. We don't know when the house settlement will be finalized. That's still ongoing. And so we deferred that from 2025. So we also look to include that in 2026.
Good. Any other questions?
I think when we normally, do you have all the resources that you need to do your job there?
I think that's an interesting question.
Or how,
Um,
do you have enough resources to do enough?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I will say that the resources we do have, we use very wisely. In relation to our peers, we are very small in staff. Typically, an institution of our size, an R1 research institution, has anywhere from 6 to 9 auditors. We have 3. And so, we've got to really manage our time well, and look at the high risk areas that our university has, which are sometimes different than our peers. And so, yeah.
We're fortunate to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, Regent Winter.
Excuse me, to some extent, this is a topic that a colleague just touched on. To whom do you report?
We report to the university president and Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee.
Okay, you have a dual reporting.
Yes, we do. Sure.
Anything else? All right. Thank you so much, Jana.
Thank you.
All right. Next up from Emporia State University, Tammy Norman. Welcome, Tammy. Good morning.
Can you hear me fine? Okay, great. So,
Give the clicker enough.
there you go. Magically, it worked. And it would be going. Oh, it does. Okay, we're on. Yay. All right. So this is our annual audit report and our plan. And our mission is very simple. It's to enhance and protect the value using risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight, because we mitigate risk and ensure efficient and appropriate processes across the university. That's just a little bit about me. As the Director of Internal Audit, I've been there since 2016. And this semester, I have a grad student that I wanted to highlight because he truly is an expert in cybersecurity, which worked out nicely with our audit plan. This is the org chart, and I wanted you to see it. Because if you notice the title of my doctoral work was all about the placement of internal audit. And my findings were that it's not so much who you report to, but who has the best view. And in our world, I report to the president. And I softline into general counsel, who we meet quarterly and we work together closely. And he's an advocate of internal audit. So I feel really good about our placement. And then I line into you all. And with the new standards, we appreciated your contact information because that's really the way to work. Okay, we're required to report these things, just like my colleagues. Our charter was just signed this morning by, thank you very much, by Regent. And independence, I believe our reporting line, I'm unrestricted. General counsel will tell you that there's 3 people at our university that has access to any and all information. That's the president, that's general counsel, and it's internal audit. We have an audit plan that I'm going to show you. My resources are adequate. We're on strict budgets, as you know, at Emporia State, being very careful how we spend our money. So I utilize grad students and student employees that have come through my auditing classes. Our conformance with the code, we are in line. All work was performed that way. The risk response at Emporia State has really exceeded my expectations because we've done ERM from the ground floor up, and council has asked me to be a member of that. And so I'm right in there in the world of audit and risk. Quality assessment, because we are so small and because in the future someday I won't be there anymore, I want to leave a good structure for my predecessor. And so this year we're going to line out, use the internal audit manual and line out the office so that it has everything so that someone could come in and take my place someday. So we're preparing for that review. And I'm going to utilize a student worker to help me with that who has had my audit class. On our plan, you'll see that we have a couple that are in work, but we anticipate their closure by the end of the month. No alarm at all. It was just we ran out of time. December goes so quickly. So they're not completed yet, but they will be. Then we completed a university building access controls. We looked at keys, physical keys and access. I was ongoing. I work the hotline. It comes out of my budget. And I've been a part of the HLC leadership team that we just finished our accreditation, and it was very successful. So that work is done. Risk assessment, worked on that. The admissions and financial aid, we moved that to CY 2025 because we hired a new financial aid director. So it wasn't fair to go in there day 2 and say, we're going to audit you. And then I work with athletics and IT on their actions that they've received from outside auditors. Added the MIAA project. I thought that that was going to be taken over and it wasn't. It came back around. So we do an assessment of our colleagues. We get their financials. We put them in a spreadsheet. We find the averages to see where we can benchmark. We benchmark ourselves from our peers in athletics. And then the Veterans Administration, when we didn't have a financial aid director, this audit came up, and so I jumped in and helped. So part of my responsibilities is that I manage my graduate assistants, and then I serve as an adjunct in the School of Business. I teach auditing, and I teach it both semesters. In the grad school in the summer, I teach a fraud examination class, and that went well. I serve as a facilitator for task force. I'm on the disclosure committee. I was on the search committee, but now I don't do that any longer because you have to be very careful of our independence. If I help choose someone and then go audit them, I'm already biased a little bit. So, and I serve on the board of governors because I live south of Wichita and have been at the Wichita IIA board of governors. So I serve on their board. And asterisk at the bottom is as of June of 2024, I was invited to sit with the executive team. And so now I'm a part of it. And so I truly do have a seat at the table. And I truly do get to see how decisions are made and how budgets are made. So it's been very helpful from an audit perspective. The proposed work, our number one is cybersecurity. And it just so happened that the upcoming Reuben Brown Cybersecurity Maturity Assessment last year, my GA and I have taken some very intense training on cybersecurity. And thanks to the grant that we were given, I think it was Senator Moran helped us secure some funds for that. We took some training, but we went one step further. We took our training in 12 units, and then we wrote audit programs for those that never existed before. And I'm going to share them with my other university colleagues because it really does cover the NIST regulations. So we're going to be doing and working on the cybersecurity audits for the first and second quarter. The MIAA project, you can see as I have listed, we're going to look at Clery reporting, our admissions and financial aid, wellness center. The hotline is ongoing. So those are the projects we proposed. Meanwhile, I'm still teaching, I'm still an adjunct, and we added a class. We had a graduate school professor, Dr. Moon, that taught advanced auditing, and he passed away suddenly. He died. And so they asked me to take over the course. This is the first semester I've taught it. It's to help prepare CPAs for their audit portion of the CPA exam. So I attend all those executive ops meetings. I'm now a part of the enterprise work group, the ERM work group, and I'm going to be resigning my board of governor position this summer. So that's ESU, internal audit. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Norman. Questions for Dr. Norman? Hearing none. Yeah. Regent Winter.
First of all, let me express my appreciation for your hard work. Hearing everything you're doing, I'm wondering how we'll be able to replicate that with just 2 more people. You do it all. So thank you for doing that, and we appreciate your passion. Same question that John asked. Do you have sufficient resources, financial and otherwise, to do your job properly?
Of course, we'd always use more, right? But right now, I feel like it's adequate. I have a good pipeline of students, and I have a good resources. And I also have the ability, and all university auditors have the ability to seek out additional help. If we had a situation where I knew nothing about the subject, I can certainly go hire that and have a third party set of auditors come in. So that's kind of my safe harbor.
Yeah, Do you also report to the president and to Blake?
And yes, I report to the president and to Blake and to all of you.
And when is the last time, if you recall, that you had an external review, a group of your peers come in and review what you're doing?
Actually, that has never happened. In 2016, when I came, I was brand new. And so I built the organization up. And then cancer of the beast got me. And I was out for a couple years. So now I'm in remission and working hard and seeing in the future that I need to really have the organization up and running so it can run without me. So I want to do a QAR in 2026 next year.
QAR.
Quality assessment review. So it'll be coming. That's okay.
Yeah, congratulations on your health recovery.
Same to you.
Appreciate your words of encouragement along the way.
You bet. You bet.
All right.
Sorry about that, and thank you very much.
That's all right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Norman? All right. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine.
And last but certainly not least, representing Fort Hays State, Wesley Winch.
Thank you, Regent Benson. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Baron Green, who I don't know how many of you have met before. Baron Green is our controller, and he's serving currently as our interim. We currently don't have an internal auditor. Brett left for a different job, and so we're in the middle of a search. And in the meantime, this important role is being filled by Baron, so he's going to do the presentation.
Welcome, Baron.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. As Wesley mentioned, my official title is controller, but in the interim, I'm kind of the acting internal auditor, so you're stuck with me this morning. So just a little bit of background on myself. Of course, as a licensed CPA for 7 years now, ethics, compliance with standards, that's all something that's very near and dear to me, so that I was pretty familiar with. So, and I also work very closely with internal audit when Brett was at the university. And so with his absence, it was kind of a logical, what do I want to say, progression for me to kind of step in and assist and make sure that ever important internal audit torch was carried on. So we do have a PowerPoint. I don't know, was that?
Let me go look for that right now. Sure, you sent it.
So. I can certainly proceed without, but if it helps for your guys' visual aid, I'm more than happy to wait.
But in the meantime, go ahead and.
Sure. Yeah. So,
get started.
in my, kind of being here today, the main thing I wanted to assure the board of was that, despite having being absent a dedicated internal auditor at the moment, of course, the audit charter, the audit mission at Fort Hays State is still alive and well. I will admit, again, serving kind of a dual capacity, the audit progress has maybe slowed just a tad. It's focused more now. I've had to dedicate my time more towards follow-ups on previous reports, things of that nature, and then just kind of really honing down on the mission critical stuff or the the more perceived high risk stuff. We have a list of aspirational audit programs, and I'll get to some of that if we get it pulled up. But again, just to kind of maintain the audit mission is alive and well at Fort Hays State. We do have a audit charter. It is updated and current, although we do plan in talking with management, we do plan to revisit that with the potential hire of a new internal auditor, make sure that everyone's on the same page there. So that's planned to be reviewed. I know there's been some questions about resources. I can dive into that. The resources for the role, I would say, are appropriate, like my counterparts have told. We can always benefit from more funding. Although at Fort Hays, internal audit is a workshop of one. So hence what kind of why I'm here. So I do think currently the way it's structured, the time and the money is about a balance. With more money, I don't know as though there'd be time to really expand more, and vice versa. So I would say it's while being somewhat time and resource limited or money limited, it's adequate and it's fairly balanced, I would say. And then, of course, hiring an internal control auditor who has more time than myself is of paramount importance. Independence, the internal auditor does report directly to the president at Fort Hays State University and to the board, of course. And so those reporting channels have stayed intact. So in my role as internal auditor, I do report to the president when necessary. So pretty familiar with that. And then, of course, all the reporting channels that were in place for people to report to the internal auditor, those are all still in place as well. So people know where to go if they have questions or things like that or concerns. So that is still all up and running. Ethics and compliance, of course, that's an ongoing area of focus for the internal auditor. So the new standards coming out effective January 9th this year. So review of that has all been kind of ongoing and making sure that we're in compliance with standards and everything. And so no issues to be noted there. Everything's moving as it should. And then, of course, risk assessment, that's probably the foremost role of audit. And so I've stepped into that role of ongoing risk assessment. I wouldn't say there's been any material changes. Of course, like I said, I would like to have a dedicated internal auditor, and that is a high priority for the university. But university-wide, enterprise-wide, no material changes to risk. Risk is still perceived as acceptable. And then maybe we're getting close. Okay, because now I was getting into the meat and potatoes now, and so I was hoping that I guess we could skip to about slide 3 or 4, maybe, or we can. Yeah. So internal audit mission, I won't go there again. Kind of touched on that, and then on to the next one. Just make sure that everything looks good. Yeah. So we talked about the charter. Independence is not impaired. Adequate resources, conformance to standards. Risk is acceptable. Let's move on. Okay, so this is kind of a review of fiscal year 2024 audit program activities, and of course, acknowledge that this was carried out. These were carried out and implemented by my predecessor, Brett. So I'm kind of in the role just following up on those prior things that he had in progress. So quite a few on the list. I don't need to go through everything in detail per se. I might highlight a few things. Of course, there's the annual requirements, things like the affiliated corporations review. That's actually a joint effort between the internal auditor and the controller. So I'm doing 2 for 1 anyways there. And then there's the ongoing, like I said, follow-ups on prior years. And I did meet with Brett Gerber prior to his departure to get a status update on all of these. And so follow-ups on what would have been fiscal year 2022, no issues there. Impress fund, procurement card, those things are ongoing. They're kind of always part of the audit plan. The university farm, we kind of do a continuous review there just from a finance point of view to maintain financial or ensure financial stability and internal controls there. There's enough nuance with that it warrants just a little bit of extra scrutiny. Same way with our rodeo and our shooting club. The farm, the rodeo, and the shooting club kind of function similar. So there's a little bit of additional oversight there. So all those audits are kind of ongoing. Of course, we completed the audits for fiscal year 2024. No issues were really noted. I will maybe say the rodeo, we did do a more in-depth review of them. There was no evidence of fraud that was discovered, but we did identify some places where some internal controls could be improved. So we did present a report to them so that they could work on those implementations, and those are kind of in progress for the current year. So that would be the status there. Our student health, of course, we have to maintain our 340B pharmacy accreditation. So that's was completed, no issues. That's an ongoing thing for the current year as well. I'll highlight alcohol sales at football games going back to 2024. I think that was the first year that was new for Fort Hays. And so in anticipation of that, we did increase some security at our football games. But we were happy to report that there weren't any incidents that were reported as a result of that. So it went well, I would say. But just, again, due to the nature of it, it's going to be an ongoing item for the current year as well, which I'll get to. our legislative post audit, the IT audit, there was kind of recommendations made there, a few things that we took on. One of the big things that we implemented at Fort Hays State University was the Arctic Wolf platform, which does 24/7 system monitoring. So that was something that came out of that. And then, increased education on cybersecurity, things of that nature. So our IT folks have kind of taken the reins on that and run with it. It's completed, and I would say it's been essentially fully implemented. So nothing to report or no issues there. Our student health, there was a review of that, and again another plan of action that was submitted to them. In talking with them, again, this was kind of prior to my role as internal auditor, but they implemented most of the recommendations of that report with a few minor caveats. One of the big things in that report was to obtain AAACH accreditation. And we did look into it, ultimately to find out that we don't meet their requirements for size. So that really is a recommendation that we looked at, but it didn't really fit, I guess, the bill at Fort Hays. So other things. They've worked with some expanding hours, offering services to students outside of normal working hours, increased counseling, things of that nature. So there have been some marked improvements that come out of that. I would say that one's been, again, completed, and everything that was going to be implemented has been. And the rest of it just didn't really fit the bill. The student athlete health and wellness, there again, that one is completed, and all those provisions have been implemented with success. So that is kind of up and functioning as it should. And then just the final thing on the list there, the DEI post audit, of course, that was kind of on the forefront of everyone's mind last year. That was a pretty big topic. So we work closely, or I work closely with Joe, our general counsel. So no issues really to report there. But again, just due to its nature, it's going to be an ongoing area of legislative post audit. Sorry, maybe I'm a accountant, so maybe I get a little bit overzealous with my acronyms. So if you have any questions, yeah, feel free to ask. So that's kind of the wrap up again of the things that were completed under my predecessor's supervision in fiscal year 2024. We can move into 2025. These are kind of the things that we have on the slate for the current year. There's going to be a lot of carryover. As I mentioned in my role, it's kind of gone back to basics, essentially follow up on things that have already been in place. And so I don't know as though there's anything too major to call out there. There's a few things listed at the bottom there is TBD. Again, these are things that we had on the audit program. I don't know as though time will allow me to get to that this year. And of course, pending the hire of an internal auditor, there certainly will be. So those are a little bit, I would say, contingent on time there. And I've kind of already talked about the farm, the rodeo, and kind of the ongoing monitoring pieces of those. So that being said, we can move on. This kind of just looks forward, the remainder of the year. Obviously, as I've said, our first and foremost priority is getting a new dedicated internal auditor hired. But in the meantime, again, the audit function will continue as usual or as best it can. So we'll have continued risk assessment. That's an ongoing piece. Again, follow up on existing audits and, of course, consult with the board and fellow internal auditors as needed and go from there. So that being said, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take those.
Thank you, Barron. Questions for Barron and Fort Hays State? Regent Winter.
Of the 6 institutions, universities that we have, how many are operating currently with an interim or temporary internal auditor?
I don't know as though I have the answer to that, but I'm the only one as far as I know. Yeah. So.
And to what extent, if at all, do you all cooperate? If somebody needs more help, they've got people out, you call a colleague up and help.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we meet quarterly as a Kansas Region Auditor Group. But anytime that anybody needs assistance, we email each other, we call each other. We're very open and we share what's going on in our relative offices. And so anytime anybody needs assistance, we're always available. So we're happy to help.
Is it required under audit standards for each institution or organization to have a permanent auditor, or is it possible to kind of outsource internal auditing?
Yes, we do have some institutions in the nation that do outsource their audit functions, but a majority of those are in-house. A majority of the institutions in the nation have their own in-house audit functions.
And don't overreact to this question because I'm not necessarily pushing it. In fact, I'm not pushing it. To what extent have you all as internal auditors considered possibility of having an internal audit group that did all this auditing as opposed to dedicated internal audit?
Yeah, so I think that is basically a management decision that each institution kind of looks at and analyzes. Outside auditors are very expensive. So generally it's more cost effective to have in-house auditors that, are housed in one institution, and we focus on that institution. I do know of some colleagues at other institutions, particularly on the East Coast. They have outsourced those functions in the past. They've now brought those back in as in-house functions because of the cost.
I wasn't necessarily thinking about actually outsourcing, but rather have a pool of auditors that serve just the university.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've thought about before. And, it would make sense, I think, for, like IT. It would be nice to have an IT auditor that was, like a system auditor that could perform the same audit across the universities in the Regent system. But I think it's important to have dedicated auditors at each institution. Each institution is very different. And so to get auditors up to speed, KU Med has a med center. K-State has a lot of affiliated corporations and a vet center. And so the functions of the universities are unique enough that we kind of need dedicated auditors at each institution just because of the operations are nuanced.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would, of course, encourage you all as needed on a temporary basis to swap resources. help each
Sure.
other. Sorry, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And in that same vein, we discussed a lot at the December meeting, the need for cross-training among existing staff wherever possible. I know it's really difficult when you have a one-person office. But anything at all that you can do to cross-train and make sure you don't have all of your eggs in one basket with one person would be highly encouraged.
Yeah, and in fact, it's a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, coincidence or irony. When Brett was the internal auditor, we had actually teamed up together because I have audit experience from my prior work in public accounting. And so things like the rodeo, we had teamed up and done some ongoing review of that. So we had some cross training and we had some redundancies there, but it was just as it happened, it reverted back to me. So yeah, that is kind of an idea that we are experimenting with. So
Okay, fantastic. Yes, Regent Dykes.
Not necessarily a question for them, but more of a question for us. And maybe being on this for 3 years, I'm a little late to the table as far as asking it, but hearing all of them today say that they're adequate is not really something I would think we would want to strive for. And since they all have some kind of line to this committee, whether it's a direct line or a dotted line, is there anything that we should be looking at in providing resources so that they can hire more individuals? Are we dropping the ball in some way and not getting audits done at the universities and having the oversight that this committee has in that regard? If it's resources at the university, I mean, I know at the bank, we've got an internal audit department. It doesn't make any money, but it can save you a lot of money. So it's always one that's easy to cut back on or say we're not going to do because it's not a revenue generating area. But I mean, it is something that is protecting us and our oversight of the universities. But if it's resources, I know, Baron, you said time and money. If you had more money, you could get more people that create more time.
absolutely, yeah, that's
So
yeah.
it's just maybe a bigger picture that, I don't know how we look at that, but is there resources that we have as the regents that we ought to be putting toward the internal audit function at the 6 universities to help our oversight, since they have a direct line, direct line to us as a committee.
Sure.
Vice President Rizk.
I'd be happy to fill in a little bit. So as far as are there resources at the Board of Regents level? Unfortunately, no. We don't have resource to share for amongst the internal audit function. One thing we could do is ask the internal auditors to benchmark themselves, their staffing levels compared to their peer institutions. There was reference to R1 institutions, so large research universities typically have an internal audit staff of X. And how do our universities rate against that benchmark? We could ask for that information and get a better sense for that across all 6. 3
Yeah,
versus
6 to 9 at most places, and you have 3, and Amy and Barron were nice and just said, we're adequate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't get into numbers, but I mean, that doesn't sound like maybe we're doing as much as we could do to support them in the roles that they have at the universities to have an oversight at the universities. And I mean, each of you had a significant list of audits that you try to do on an annual basis. And a staff of 1, and oh, by the way, I have another job and Tammy's teaching 10 classes, and also
Is that information you'd be able to come up with fairly easily? Yes, Dr. Norman.
thing I wanted to add was, because our standards did change, and you're right on track. Part of the standards now encourage the board, the audit committee, to have oversight of our budgets, because I don't think we've ever come to you and said, these are our budgets, and had those discussions. So you're playing very well into the new standards.
and by the way, I didn't read the new standards, but
That's all right. We've been,
it's not like I did a,
Sure they did. Yeah.
it's a good read.
keep forgetting to turn this on. I don't think this is unique to these 3 versus the other 3 schools that are presented, so it's just something for us to think about going forward, that do we have the oversight that we need as this committee for organizations and internal audit that have a line to us?
We'll carve out space on maybe a future agenda to revisit that, and especially that benchmarking information would be very helpful. Yeah. Yes, Regent Winter.
So you got John and I monopolizing this. Maybe that's because we have PTSD from being careful about audits and going on to bankers, or one former banker, one current. But
Our regulators just showed up yesterday, so maybe it's top of.
I didn't see any sweat running off your brow, so I'm sure you're fine. Anyway, in all seriousness, funding and financing properly audits is a very significant issue. And I think I've heard enough that I would certainly recommend, Chair, that we visit this. It takes more money. It takes more money. We've got some great people doing very, very hard work. And one of the characteristics that I saw from auditors is that they're not really very aggressive in asking for money. That's our job, to make sure that we're giving all these folks the right financial resources. I'm not convinced we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will definitely follow up on that. Any other questions for Barron and Fort Hays State? All right. Well, thank
For
you.
your time.
Good discussion this morning. All right, we'll move into board agenda items under fiscal affairs. First of all, anything on this afternoon's consent agenda that my fellow committee members would like to pull off and discuss? If not, would entertain a recommendation.
We're getting a presentation on the stadium. I want to see that before, I guess I'd say.
Or consent. Okay.
That's sitting on consent.
One part, yeah.
One part of it.
Yeah, it's kind of split up, so I don't know.
Well, we may, David, if it's all right with you, yeah, just go ahead and we'll go ahead and discuss that project now. Welcome.
Good morning, Regents. David Miller from Wichita State. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you today about the university's replacement of Cessna Stadium, which we currently call University Stadium. And there we go. So just a little background information. Cessna Stadium was built back in 1946. I remember when I was a freshman coming onto the campus of WSU back in the 1990s and seeing the stadium as I drove in every day and wondering when the university was either going to demolish it or renovate it. So the stadium has been in need of something for quite a long time. Just a little quick Cessna Stadium trivia that I thought was kind of interesting as I was working on the presentation, which I didn't know. As you look at the stadium, the portion of the stadium that is in ground, that's the portion that was built back in 1946. And the structure that is supported by the steel frame, that was built back in the 1960s. And back then when that was built, the stadium was actually considered one of the most modern football stadiums in the nation at that time. If you look at the construction site today, the east side of the stadium has been demolished and we're currently in phase 1A construction. And I'll dig deeper into the different phases of the project as we go through the presentation. But one thing I want to outline for you that's really important as part of this project overall is the State Track and Field Championship. That occurs at Cessna Stadium every May of each year. And we had an economic impact statement that was done that indicated that that contributes about $7 million a year to our community. So it's been really important through this project that we make sure that we preserve that State Track and Field Championship occurring in Wichita and occurring on Wichita State's campus. And you'll see that as part of the design when we talk about the construction phases. The project timeline overall, the project was initially adopted back in 2022. The budget was amended back in 2023 to bring the budget up to $78 million and add the phase construction approach into the model. Phase 1A construction, which is the east side of the stadium, that began in the summer of 2024. The soccer field and the track, which is phase 1B, that's planned to begin this summer, 2025. And then phase 2, which is the larger and more expensive portion of the stadium, is planned for approximately summer of 2026. Again, all of those are occurring. Each phase ends at roughly the time that the state track meet is planned to begin. Digging just a little bit deeper, I don't want to belabor this too much, but looking at each of the individual phases, phase 1A on the east side, that involves construction of aluminum bleachers to seat approximately 5,800 spectators. The addition, if you can see it up there at the top in that green section, a pavilion building, which will include restrooms and ticket booth and concessions, and then parking improvements. The overall project cost of phase 1A is $11.8 million. And that was previously funded through revenue bonds, and those revenue bonds are currently funded by the Board of Trustees of Wichita State. Phase 1B, that phase is planned to begin here in the summer of 2025. That widens the soccer field print and adds a 8-lane track around the section, and then also adds jumping events next to the east side of the stadium. So phase 1B, the estimated cost is $8.42 million. I want to make sure that I touch on this because on your consent agenda is a request for a bond issue of $6.81 million. And I want to touch on why that is, why we're not requesting the full $8.4 million in funding at this time. And that relates to our existing legislative authorization that was adopted back during the 2023 legislature. That authorization totaled $17.85 million. We already issued $11.04 million to fund Phase 1A. And so that leaves us with the $6.81 million in existing legislative authorization. And that's the reason that you have the variance between the cost of the estimate for Phase 1B and then what we're requesting in the bonding. And you'll see later on in a few slides how we're proposing to address that. Phase 2, that's the final phase, but it is broken up into two different components. Again, this would be targeted to begin in the summer of 2026. It involves the demolition of the existing west side of the Cessna Stadium. It would seat approximately 6,200 spectators, and it would include press boxes, suites, locker rooms, and training facilities. The estimated cost of that phase is around $53.9 million. And this is the specific issue that's before you today and the Board of Regents is a request to add on to the legislative platform to take to the legislature to seek legislative authorization to bond up to $60 million to fund Phase 2.
David, I did have a question about that. Just to kind of get a refresher on the entire stadium project, I went to your website on Monday of this week, and it has the estimated cost for Phase 2A and 2B at $39.5 million. And that was from May of 2024, but that was only about 9 months ago.
Okay.
So what would be the reason for the increase between 39.5 to basically 54 million?
I have to speculate, Regent, that the website did not get updated correctly. And to be honest, I'm a little confused about the timing because the amendment to bring the entire project up to $78 million, that was done back in 2023. So I honestly, I don't know exactly why that might occur, but I have to speculate that the website simply was not updated correctly.
Okay. But it's still apparently in May of last year, it was estimated to be 39.5. So I'm just trying to figure out what changed between then and now, even if the website
Sure.
wasn't updated.
Well, this $53.9 million is consistent with the original $78 million total project budget that was amended back in 2023.
Okay.
So just to summarize real quick, again, what we're seeking is legislative authorization up to $60 million. How that $60 million breaks out is outlined for you here. We would roll a portion of the funding needed to complete Phase 1B into that $60 million, so that'd be $2.4 million. Then Phase 2 construction, and then a small inflationary contingency. A couple of things I want to outline for you overall as part of this request. The first is that we are currently going through a process to reviewing the design and seeing what our options are to reduce the overall cost of the stadium. The second is that prior to any bond issuance, this will come back before you regardless of the legislative authorization that we hope will be approved by the legislature. And the other thing I want to just touch on is this is a large project for our campus overall. And large projects can run into potential issues. And as well as approaching the legislature and getting approval, the legislature is only here and in session for a very short amount of time. And so if we do run into an issue, we want to make sure that there's a little bit of extra room there to make sure that we can address those issues if they come up. Regarding funding sources overall, currently the Board of Trustees has committed the equivalent of $22 million in principal and interest payments towards that $60 million. We are working on local partnerships with our local governments for a commitment of $18 million. And the remaining balance, $20 million, would come from donations, naming rights, and/or the cost reductions that I mentioned that we're currently working through. We would not use general use resources, meaning tuition or state funding, in order to pay the principal and interest payments. And just so you know as well, the president has been, at least in my communications with him, very clear that if we run into any issues related to the donations or any other funding sources on here, that we would not proceed with construction of phase 2.
Yeah, so appreciate the presentation and tackling some of the questions that I raised on our call. Okay, so first one is 6.8 million to finish phase 1A or 1A and 1B. Can you go back to that just real quick?
Sure.
And then you do 2.4 million on this one from that same, that's where I'm getting confused.
It's the difference between the cost of phase 1B, the 8.
Okay, you got the 6.8 here and then the 8.42 delta. Okay. So, the other, I guess, follow-up question I'd have is you said this would, even if you get the bonding authority from the legislature, which I think our original stuff said you guys were gonna issue the bonds potentially in March if you got it. Is that, did I read that wrong somewhere?
The March is the item that's on your consent agenda for the $6.8 million issue.
Okay, I gotcha. I was gonna say I was moving too fast as far as getting confused.
Use of this, if I can.
Yeah,
Rick.
go ahead, sir.
Use of the $60 million would be dependent on a couple of things. One, if we do proceed with phase 2, as well as the timing of how the construction is coming along.
You said it would come back to us before you could issue the bonds?
Yes, just like the 6.8 million is coming back before you for authorization to issue the bonds. Yes.
And then when you look at the the fundraising aspect of this, do you guys have any pledges in hand yet? I mean, have you started that process?
We have a number of leads. We're still working on getting firm commitments.
Let's see if anybody else has questions on this, I guess. I think you guys have addressed the issues that I brought up.
When would you have a more definitive timeline on those pledged donations? Because I know we've approved bonding before for actual in-hand pledges. So how far away are you from having those?
I would convey to you that we would not move forward with construction in any way if if we do not have firm commitments on the donations.
And
I can't, I apologize. I can't give you a clear timeline of when that might happen, but I can confirm for you that we will not move forward with construction if we don't have those firm commitments.
I'll relay to the rest of the board. I was able to have a conversation with President Muma and a pledge. You know, my issue was general use funds. Where's that coming from? Are we putting ourselves on the hook? And is there any chance for us to intervene before you'd have general use budget going to pay for a stadium project that's academic related and all that? He assured me that general use funds would not be used in this project and that they'll move forward only with what, because they're still solidifying the local partnership piece too.
Correct.
Until they know what they can spend, they won't start spending money. But the importance with the state track meet timelines and all that stuff, that getting something through this legislative session to at least have the bonding authority, but then to issue the bonds, they got to come back to us. Is that right?
Sure.
So I think there's an opportunity for them to solidify their MOUs with local partners, work on pledges with donations, and then we have the opportunity before the bonds are issued to make sure that there's funding in place that's beyond general use. Is that all accurate? Everything I said, Lane, you check off on that? You check off on
Yes,
that?
sir. Yes, sir.
And I'll be supportive of this today, both to your question on consent, pushing the other part forward, and then when we get to discussion. Thank you for addressing my
sir.
questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
And just to reiterate, a pledge you had made as well, not only no general funds, but no tuition dollars would be
Correct.
allocated out of.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. It's important for everybody to take note of. Yes, Regent Winter.
On that point, excuse me, on that point of no general use dollars, has that changed? Something is my mind says, and maybe you can help me out, Elaine, that in the last 2 or 3 months, there was a proposal to use general use dollars. I thought I read that, but I've read it wrong then.
Well, I think part of it is when they do the bonding issuing that the university has to stand behind that bond and say, hey, we're going to pay this thing. Right. And so that's part of the language, but then when we zeroed in on that, I think we accidentally hit a right turn that was unintentional. Side of that that's now been cleared up, but I think that's where that language is coming from the bond issuance. I think they have to put that on there. Is that right, Elaine?
That's correct.
I've never paid attention to that before.
So there's typically language that says the university will, and back up the funding source from their totality of their funding sources, and they get a better bonding rate for that.
That's typical.
Yes, that is very typical.
So I'm going to try to make this quicker than maybe usual. So there's 60 million there. How much more is there? Is this?
This would complete the project.
Has any other money been spent already? That's it, $60 million, no more?
So the total project overall is currently budgeted at 78 million. Yeah. This would give us authority up to 80 million with phase 1A, 1B, and then phase 2.
So that 60 million is a big part of the 80?
Yes, sir.
That 80, what's the source of that 80 or that extra 20?
The initial 20 is all from the Board of Trustees. They are,
That's that tax.
That's 20 plus 22 from the local.
yes, yes.
And what form will that 22 million take? Is that a pledge for annual appropriations toward this?
It's an annual contribution equal to the principal and interest payment.
And do you happen to remember the annual cost of that? 22 million?
That depends when it gets issued, what the rates are, right?
Well, anyway, so it's going to have an annual cost. There'll be an annual cost to fund the payment of the bond. What's that cash flow that's going to go to pay off the Board of Trustees?
Yeah.
What's that cash flow currently being used for?
Sure. So the Board of Trustees has authority for 1.5 mils within Sedgwick County to levy 1.5 mils. That brings in approximately about $10.8 million. Currently, the Board of Trustees, along with the current commitments that exist related to both this project and other projects on campus, that principal and interest overall runs about $5.4 million out of that 10.8 million in revenue. And then in addition to that, or no, I apologize, 3.9 million is the debt service currently funding other projects within Wichita State. About 5.4 million goes towards scholarships and student support. And then there's another 500,000 roughly that goes to city and county interns and local government support.
So my crude question, I'm jumping over a couple of steps here, is are there programs currently being funded out of the mill levy that will not be available in the future if this project is done?
No, not that I'm aware of.
No, it's not an issue. They actually have more, I think, my understanding, observer, but I think they have more capacity probably than what they're exercising at this point if they wanted to take on more risks. So
The Board of Trustees won't be sitting there in 2 years saying, oh my gosh, I gotta come up with some cuts so we can feed this. Good, thank you.
Yes, Regent Dicus.
If the project is done in the stadium, do you have a long-term commitment from Asia as far as a state track meet?
Yes. Yeah, I'm seeing head shake, yes.
Other questions this morning? All good discussion. And I would obviously encourage you as you talk about this project and President Muma and everybody else with Wichita State, really give some context to why this is important for the campus, for the community, the economic impact, the student recruitment, really how it fits into a larger picture. To keep somebody from just looking at it by itself and saying, it's a lot of money for a stadium. Really, provide that context to show how important it is to the growth of the university.
I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Yes, Regent.
But and just to make sure that people think that, or don't think that I'm against this program, I think it's very important, and you brought it up. Today's students are looking for really fine facilities, and this has been for a long time an area of need on campus, and I think it's really going to be helpful for enrollment and for academics as well because of the cash flow that comes from that to do this project. So I personally don't consider it just another athletic expenditure. It's an academic expenditure to the extent that it makes the campus much more compelling and positive. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and I'd add to that, Regent Winter too. It's a project I've believed in. It needs to get done, and if the local partnerships come through, I'd be certainly help any of those conversations. Though I don't know that you need them. I think the city, county, and large USD 259 school district recognize the importance of having this facility, not just for Wichita State, for the city. Wichita State does a great job being partnered inside the community. And this is another place where they're trying to create a community asset as well as a university asset with this. And I think with, the possibility of $18 million worth of support shows that. So I guess I'd add one other question on that new track. If there's a 400-meter race between you and Andy Schlapp and President Muma, who would win?
I'm pretty sure
You.
President Muma would. I see him running every morning on
That's always
campus.
the answer. Yeah.
By the way, I had a full disclosure. I have another reason I'm prepared to support this, and that is that in 1970, I finished 8th out of 8 people in the state finals in discus.
Is that right?
I did finish.
Obviously left
8
an
out of 8
impression
out
on
of
you.
8.
Yeah.
It was a foot fault.
Sounds like you just showed up.
It was fun to go
Yeah.
to Wichita.
And Vice President Frisbee did give a good reminder that the Board of Trustees' use of the local property tax dollars, all of those are approved by the Board of Regents anyway. So that's good information for us to have. Lots of good discussion this morning. Any other questions for David related to this project?
I'd just say thank you again for being responsive to the questions.
Thank you for your support.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, David. All right. We'll back up then and ask for any other discussion related to the consent agenda for this afternoon's meetings. And if there are no discussion points, would entertain a recommendation for approval.
A motion.
Okay. Motion from Regent Rolfe,
Second.
second by Regent Dicus. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent agenda is approved, recommended for approval this afternoon. All right, so moving into our discussion agenda items for this afternoon. Obviously, the first one related to the WSU project. Anything else we need to discuss on that, Vice President Frisbee?
I don't believe so. You do have information starting on page 35 that describes the non-budgetary legislative proposal, which is a strange title for something that does relate to funding. But so this is a request that Chief of Staff Kelly Oliver will be presenting to you for this $60 million authorization and to go to legislature for that. There's some draft language on the bottom of page 36. And in accordance with your new board policy, we do provide you with updated information on their composite financial index data, on their debt burden, debt coverage ratio, and their viability ratio. I don't know if there are any other questions related to the $60 million authorization.
Any other questions or discussion? No, would entertain a motion to approve item 1.
To approve or send.
To send, pardon me, yes, to send for, recommend sending to the board for consideration this afternoon. Okay. Motion by Regent Rolfe, second by Regent Dicus. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Item 2, act on proposed uniform market-based tuition for the Foundations in Structured Literacy course at the state universities in academic years 2025 and 2026. I believe we have Dr. Lane joining us this morning. Always great to see you.
It's great to be with you this morning to talk about uniform market rate tuition for the Foundations in Structured Literacy, equipping educators with the skills in structured literacy course. You may recall this course we discussed briefly in November at your board meeting. It was developed by our public universities literacy faculty. It is now in the process of design to make it accessible to all of our in-service teachers across the state of Kansas. And it provides for, in Senate Bill 438, that this course will be offered at low or no cost to our Kansas educators. So the blueprint has funding to pay for the tuition. In discussions with the colleges of education deans, we come forward to recommend to you to establish that uniform market rate tuition of $300 a credit hour. The course is 6 credit hour course, and so we're asking for you to establish that rate. Be glad to answer any questions specifically about the course or the number of participants.
And Dr. Lane, our agenda materials quote or estimate about 1,500 educators would be able to take advantage of that. Is that number still solid?
That number changes a little bit, Regent Benson, based on the data that we get from KSDE. It's based on the number of educators who are participating in their LETRS curriculum initiative. So certainly any Kansas educator, particularly in the grade bands preschool through grade 8, are eligible for the course. They may choose one of these other options. So we're actually estimating between 5,500 to 6,500 will actually take the course. They're all eligible. There are about 18,000 educators in Kansas. That includes administrators. 15,000 specifically in this grade band. So we think that really it's more around a 6,000 number who will actually take this course because there are other options available to them.
Are there questions for Dr. Lane? Making incredible progress on this.
Yeah, I think, Swint has asked several times about cooperation between universities. The formation of this course has been a good exercise in that cooperation, so.
It's the first time in history that our education faculty have worked across the universities to develop a course. So it's been a great learning process. They have been putting forth a lot of effort, and we look forward to getting this out to our educators in Kansas.
With support to the board's agenda.
Motion by Regent Rolfe, second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Thank you very much.
So much, Dr. Lane. All right, that all the board agenda items. Let's see, item C, WSU request to issue refunding bonds. Vice President Frisbee or David?
Thank you. I still think that Ted Lassen would be a prime candidate for face of your fundraising campaign for the stadium. But in front of you, Regents, you do have a piece of paper as an action item for Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee. So WSU, not related to the stadium, this is a separate issue. I conflated those two things on our agenda call. There is board policy that allows the universities to do refinancing when it's advantageous. And there is a section in there for refunding when it eliminates burdensome or unduly constraining covenants. And in this case, and we talked a little bit about this on the agenda call, there are 2021 L bonds that Wichita State is seeking to refinance a piece of. And so David Miller will talk to this a little bit, but then also Jim McMurray from KDFA is also here to speak about that. So.
Morning, Regents. Thank you again for the opportunity to visit with you. I'm going to provide you a little bit of background information regarding the request before you, and then Jim McMurray will come up and visit with you regarding KDFA's recommendation. Even though this is something that I have not experienced before in my career, in my discussions with Jim, he's outlined that he is very well versed and that this isn't something that is unusual. So to provide you a little bit of background information, in July of 2021, the university issued tax-exempt revenue bonds for construction of a new convergent science building, which we now call DIRT, or the Digital Research and Transformation Hub. The initial plan for the building under the previous administration and a previous president did not include private companies occupying research space within that facility. To better align the use of the building with the direction of the current administration and provide a collaborative space where private companies, university researchers, and students through our applied learning initiatives can work together, Wichita State is requesting to replace a portion of the existing outstanding tax-exempt bonds with taxable bonds so that private companies may lease a portion of the space in the building. KDFA's financial advisor estimates this will add approximately $138,000 to the university's annual debt service, increasing from $632,000 to $770,000 annually in relation to this item. The taxable debt will keep the same term as the original debt with final maturity in fiscal year 2051. And please note, this is also a debt service item in which the Board of Trustees contributes to. Of that total debt service, they contribute $532,000 annually. The increase in annual debt service payments is expected to be easily covered with the additional rent revenue that would come in through this action. And with that said, I'd be either happy to stand for questions, or it might be best if you hear from Jim McMurray, but I'll follow your direction.
Any questions for David before Jim comes up?
Yeah, just one. So I know you're saying different administrations, different thoughts. What classes were supposed to be going on in there that aren't? Was there a change in that? Because the original design was for a class.
The intent that it would be dedicated to academic research only. So university researchers would fill the space.
Thank you.
Any other questions for David?
I guess when you say previous administration, was that Bardo or Golden?
President Golden.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Your policy is working as designed. These refunding transactions normally are done for savings. In this case, it's not. It's a tax compliance issue. It's something that unfortunately we really don't have any discretion at this point. When the project was done originally, with all tax exempt proceeds, you're signing yourselves up to the duration of the financing's tax compliance, and circumstances do change. They have changed in this case, and these remedial actions are required. The only alternative to bonds would be the university just have sufficient cash to defease the bonds. So more than happy to elaborate more, but it's something that needs to happen for tax compliance.
Questions or comments?
Given the appropriate amount of scrutiny, appreciate you coming to our meeting, sitting through it all.
Absolutely.
To
Yeah.
deliver that message.
Thank you. All right, hearing no further discussion, would entertain a motion to recommend approval.
Moved.
Okay, motion by Regent Rolfe.
Second.
Second by Regent Dykus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you again, David and Jim. All right, Vice President Frisbee, any progress reports on State University Capital Renewal Initiative or campus restoration efforts?
Yes, in fact, we had a meeting with many, I don't know how many people were on the call that day. The Council of Business Officers and a number of our facilities folks had a large Zoom or Teams meeting a week back to talk about the Campus Restoration Act and how we're going to develop the structure for the template for how they'll be providing you with your plans for how we're going to aggregate $180 million across the system for all of the myriad projects. So that's probably our update for this month.
Fantastic. All right, any questions for Vice President Frisbee? All right, moving into new business item E, I believe audit findings. We have one of those.
We do.
For this month. Care to set that
Yes.
up?
So I'll set that up. Regents, in front of you is an extract of, I think, 6 pages from the state's annual consolidated financial report. This is a 196-page document. I'm not belaboring you with all of that. But the very end, the independent auditor, CLA, the firm that is engaged by the state of Kansas to do the annual audit for the state, did have some findings for Wichita State this year. And you'll see the 2 items there, starting on the 3rd and 4th pages. You'll also note on the last page of the document reference to a prior year finding related to Fort Hays State, which has been resolved. So this year's finding related for Wichita State, I think the scale of their processing has now caught them up in some findings because there is more examination of processes. And so I think David Miller wants to talk a little bit about the 2 findings for you.
Morning, Regents. In the state 2024 audit, we did have 3 findings, which I'd like to provide a little background information to you, as well as what our corrective action plan currently looks like related to those. So the first 2 items I want to visit with you about are somewhat related. The first one involves implicit approvals within our existing ERP banner system. And what I mean by that is our ERP system was implemented back in 2006. And the way the system is currently configured, if you are set up to have authority to enter a journal entry into the system and also have the authority to approve a journal entry within that system, then when the individual enters that journal entry, it is automatically approved without a second review. And that is not standard practice. Going back and looking, trying to figure out why in the world the system was even set up or configured that way, the conclusion that we drew is that it dates back to when the system was initially implemented. And back then, the university worked very much off of a paper process. So an individual would submit a journal entry request on paper, and it would have the signature of that individual requesting it. It would go to a vice president. They would sign that piece of paper, and then it would go to someone in accounting who would enter the journal entry into the banner system. So you had the initial request, the approval, and then someone else was entering it who had that implicit approval process within the banner system. We are working on changing that configuration now. We're currently in testing of that, and we anticipate to have that change done most likely within the next couple of weeks. That's the first item. The second item that is related to that, if you will, is we were cited for an individual who did not work within central finance that approved a journal entry. And what I'd like to outline for you here is that this involves an individual who previously did work in central finance and does have the background and understanding of accounting to be given that authority to approve those type of journal entries. Our issue that was cited here was that we lack a policy that outlines how we handle those types of situations. That if someone outside of central finance is given the authority to approve a journal entry, we don't have a policy that outlines the roles, responsibilities, and training that that type of individual should receive. So we are currently working on developing that policy now. I expect that to be completed within the next month. The last item involves purchasing cards. And we were cited for untimely reconciliations of the purchasing cards, as well as occasionally a lack of documentation. And this is an item that, for my perception, is the most important citing that was made through the 2024 audit. And there's a couple of things I think I'd like to outline for you. The first is I see this as an opportunity for us to have discussions on our campus about proper financial management, and make sure that we are having those discussions in a way in which we can also, as the finance team, receive feedback if there are things that aren't working for our clients and customers. The second thing is that the university has a very robust purchasing card policy that is aligned with the state's policy. We need to enforce that policy, and we will not have any issues with doing that. If I could, because I suspect the question that might be coming from the questions that were posed to the auditors, which was in relation to resources. And in a previous conversation, that question was posed to me, and it's something that I've been pondering quite a little bit. And one thing I'd outline for you is for Wichita State, for the last 6 years, we've gone through a period of very substantial growth. When I started at the university back in 2016 as the budget director, our budget was roughly about $300 million. Today, we're approaching $1 billion close for a budget. And most of that growth has occurred on the research side of the university. And as that research has grown, we have added financial resources onto the research side of the university. But the central finance portion, which is responsible for overall monitoring and those types of things, for the largest part, has not grown. And so I do think this is resources is a place that we need to look at. I think internal audit, just from your conversations earlier, is a place for us that we need to look at, as well as within accounts payable to make sure that we have the proper amount of resources there to make sure in relation specifically to the P cards, that we have the proper amount of resources there to monitor those and make sure that we're able to reach out and engage our clients where we see issues and get those resolved. I think all of you know that I've been in this role now for 2 months right now, a few days more than 2 months. So I would ask just for a little bit of grace as we work through this. But I can guarantee you that we will be enforcing the policies going forward.
Thank you, David. And your last comment was poignant, and I want to make sure that I understand. Are you saying that moving forward with research dollars, that as you get research dollars, you're automatically going to see if there's an additional cost related to that as far as keeping up with the finances and pulling down that revenue from the research as you're getting it, so that you don't get down the road and realize that it's created a liability that wasn't necessarily funded along the way?
I don't know if I can guarantee that will be automatic, but we need to track it and monitor it and make sure within central finance that we have the proper amount of resources in order to monitor those activities across the entire campus. I was referencing research in the sense of the place where the majority of the growth has occurred within our finances and our budget. But this particular issue is not concentrated just within research.
Okay. Questions, comments for David? Appreciate the explanation and corrective action moving forward.
Where's that go from here? So this was the state's audit, right?
Yes.
So is it all, does the state consider the matter resolved and we're just getting an update on it, or is there still?
So there will be a follow through then between the audit firm and the university, and central accounts and reports to ensure that there's been a resolution to the issue.
We get that follow-up also in here?
Yes, so similar to the Fort Hays item where they had provided information just on a slower timeline than requested, although all the information was correct. So then there's a follow-up in the next year's audit findings.
So it's not till the next year?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. Thank you. Thanks for the.
All right, anything else to come before the committee this morning? Lots of great discussion. All right, hearing none, we will stand adjourned. Thank you so much.